All right, thank you for staying with us. This is Daybreak on Trust Television, reaching you from the nation's capital here in Abuja. It's time for us to take a look at the next discussion on the program. Across Nigeria, devastating floods continue to ravage farmlands, destroy crops, and force tens of thousands of people to abandon their homes. At least 300 people have died so far this year, and it's believed that over 100,000 people have been displaced and are now living in temporary shelters. The flooding has affected an estimated 500,000 people and destroyed infrastructure and farmland in 27 of Nigeria's 36 states and the federal capital. Now, to give us perspectives on this, we have in the studio Director Environmental Quality Control, National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, Mr. Ayuba Jacobs. He is going to be giving us perspectives on this. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, in recent times, we have seen unprecedented flood disasters across the country, and it's worrisome. And I know that this cut across not only Nigeria, but even across, beyond the shores of Nigeria. But the most recent in Lokoja, for instance, we understand that there are issues about a dam somewhere in Cameroon as being responsible for this. What's the cause of the recent floodings?
Yeah, thank you very much. I have to let viewers know who is Nestria. Nestria, as you said, was the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, and this is a parastatal under the Federal Ministry of the Environment that has the major mandate to enforce all environmental laws, standard policies, standards, and regulations in Nigeria. And of course, we also enforce compliance to international agreement, treaties, conventions, to which Nigeria is a signatory. Yeah, and one of our major mandate is to carry out environmental educations and awareness creations to the general public and to schools, of course, because we believe in catching them young. Every Thursday we go out and create awareness. And of course, more importantly, we also collaborate with relevant stakeholders on the matters of environment. Yes, it's obvious that the perennial flooding in Nigeria is always there, and a case study of Kogi State. And this is not the first time of expressing that. 2012, we had similar thing.
Dr. Ayuba.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not doctor. I'm not doctor.
Okay.
I'm Mr. Yeah.
Mr. Ayuba.
Yeah.
In 2012,
Yeah.
although people have said this year's flood is more than that of 2012.
Yeah.
But when you look at some of the pictures, especially emanating from Kogi,
Yeah.
they look like exactly like the pictures of 2012.
Yeah.
After the 2012 flooding, of course, at that time they said it was unprecedented, it had not happened before, and so it came as a surprise. After that flood, a post-needs assessment, disaster assessment was conducted and all of that. Why did this come as a surprise again?
Yeah, you see.
10 years after.
Yeah, you see, you need to consider, the terrain of Lokoja, the position of Lokoja. Even though we have hills, mountain around, but where people are staying, is down, right down the mountain, and of course, close to a water body, that is River Niger and Benue. And you rightly said, that it was probably built, due to, that's what I heard too, due to dam collapse from somewhere in Cameroon. And you see, the major reason is that people, just from the clips you showed, right? And if you see where people are building houses on the very low land, that if you call me to come and pay 100 naira for that plot, I won't. Because people don't bother to assess the land they are building their houses, right? And that's why these keep occurring. And of course, despite the awareness creation they have been, it happens more than 12 years ago, 10 years ago. And people were enlightened, people were asked to relocate. Did they?
Some people didn't have where to go, but that's not
the
issue. Before then, you talked about the dams.
Yeah.
My colleague talked about the dams. At that time, there was intense rainfall, and then the dams were opened, and so the waters came and it increased the flooding.
Yeah.
So there were recommendations of states building buffer dams. What became of that?
You see, building buffer dam. You know, I can't imagine another country causing a problem that we are currently experiencing in Nigeria, right? But we must, unfortunately, people have been taking proactive measures. When, no matter how the volume of water that has been discharged, if you prepare for the coming of this volume, the impact will not be much as this. One, we don't have sustainable drainage system. We don't have sustainable drainage system. And facilities and people that build houses, they disobey building codes. And of course, the State Town Planning Development Authority are not helping matters by not enforcing their local laws. You see people building along the waterways, and more importantly, people discharging waste into all the drainages, and at the end, down the stream.
All right, so what sort of collaboration is there between NESRIA and the state urban planning bodies, agencies?
Yes, not only the state urban development organizations, we also make collaboration with relevant stakeholders like NEMA, like NIMET, NIHAS, that is Nigerian Hydrographic Service Agencies, right? NIMET and NIHAS, they predict.
You know, I'm particular about the urban planners.
Yes.
Because I think that NESRIA should have a role there to play in terms of where people should erect structures and where houses should be erected and all that. Do they need some kind of approvals from your ends or any of that?
Yeah, I get what you mean. We don't give approval to building plant. It is the State Development Authority that give permits, building permits, right? So what we do is if we are erecting building along the waterways, it is our duty. It's our duty to enforce the necessary law. We have regulations on soil erosion and flood control. Any activities that will affect, that will cause flood, we have the power, the mandate to enforce that. But when we see such houses that are not supposed to be where they are, along waterways, right? Because we carry out routine compliance monitoring.
But what you are saying is reactive. What you are saying is when that happens, when the structures are erected.
Yeah.
How about before the structures are erected?
Not only when the structures are erected. I said that we carry out routine compliance monitoring. Especially...
How effective is this monitoring?
No, we do that every day. We have 34 offices across the country.
What does it entail, this monitoring?
It entails we go out to ensure that all facilities comply with all our regulations. I said we have 34 gazetted environmental regulations which we are currently operationalizing across the country. When we see any facilities that is blocking waterways, right, what we do is to immediately put a stop work order, right? We put a stop work order, and for them to come and inform them from erecting such building or properties across waterways. And of course, at the end, we demand for their necessary permits, and most time they show us, they present
If NESRIA has been doing all of this, should we have this volume of devastation? Because some of the causes is building where people should not build.
I said we carry out routine compliance monitoring. Let me just give you a classical example of what we did in Lagos, somewhere around Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. A very big facility, I won't mention the name of facilities, was trying to construct a property, a road, across the waterways. And we received several letters of complaints, right? And after consultations to the headquarters, then the agency made decision that the construction should be pulled down. We went there. We went to court, of course. Court gave the final pronouncement that the construction will pull down because affecting is wrongly constructed. So, as I said, environmental protection should not be left in the hands of the agency alone. That's why we are collaborating with relevant organizations, and they are doing their part. And next year, based on their mandate, we have a mandate, right? And other organizations have their mandate too. So that's the reason why all the relevant stakeholders need to work together.
Okay, you know, before, just like a follow-up, before we get to our guest who is also joining us virtually to chip in on this, is there any kind of correspondence between Nigeria and its neighbors when it comes to the control of water levels and the monitoring of water levels? I'm saying this with regards to the issue of the dams, you know, for instance, in Cameroon and perhaps other parts of the West African region.
Yeah, sure. We have organizations I've mentioned earlier. We have the NIMED, we have the NIHAS, that is Nigerian Hydrological Service Agency, and other organizations that have mandate to do that. We don't have mandate to do that. All what we do is that people that contravene all the extant regulations.
So your role is mainly domestic?
Of course, domestic, and of course, and if there's any international issue, I said we have the agency, Nigeria is signatory to most of this multilateral environmental agreement, and if there's any issue or international issue, of course, we come in, like the issue of dams coming from from Cameroon. Of course, NIHA should have that mandate to challenge, find out why are they not monitor controlling their dam that have been open often and often, right? Because that might not be our mandate too. But if there's any issue that relates to our mandate, we go, whether domestic or international.
All right. All right. So let's get Dr. Dahiru Muhammad, who joins us from Kano virtually. He's an environmentalist and also a climate change expert. Dr. Dahiru, thank you for joining us on Daybreak this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Ayuba.
Yeah. So from where you stand, how are we responding to these flood disasters that we have been experiencing in the past few weeks?
Well, honestly, this is so sad seeing so many people, you know, like becoming this vulnerable to these flooding cases. But I think as a country, I've always said this, when it comes to cases like this, there is a very little to what an individual can do. In our own part, we are trying we are making efforts daily to curtail this issue of flooding, even in a sort of a global contribution. You see, in Nigeria, the cases of flooding, I think, recently has been exacerbated by the release of this dam from Cameroon, as you have been discussing. And I think that this is more of a diplomatic cases. I don't think the country or the relevant authorities understand that we are talking about the lives and livelihood of people. I don't see a reason why a country will just release a water cubic liters without notifying, you know, the recipient or the people that might be affected. And I think this has to be reviewed by probably the maybe Ministry of Foreign Affairs and even the presidency, because I could recall vividly that by last 2016, when President Folbiya was in Nigeria, they have this MOU with President Muhammad Buhari, and I think part of that MOU entail these flooding cases, how the Cameroons are going to control their dams, and at least to be giving Nigeria a heads up that we are about to release, you know, this amount of water into your own country, because whatever they release has to pass through the Atlantic Ocean, and then, you know, it has to dispose into this Kainji, Shiroro, you know. So I don't see a reason why Nigeria will not be notified, so that peoples on the riverland can be notified to move, you know, like to the land. But you just release this water.
Okay, you know, sometimes this notification, all right, these notifications, sometimes they do come. NIMED, you know, from time to time, they release some of this information as to, you know, projections or predictions about flooding incidences and all that. But there seem to be certain hindrances, that affects the responses that we are seeing. So maybe Mr. Ayuba will talk to us about that. What are the hindrances to the responses that the way we respond, each time there are early warning signals?
You see, as I said, there are relevant agencies like NIMET and NIHAS and other relevant agencies, that predicts the flood, imminent flood, And when we hear that, we swung to action by carrying out robust awareness, which we are currently doing. Even in Lokoja, we are currently carrying out awareness and other flood-prone areas. It's just unfortunate that despite this awareness, by not only the agency and other relevant organizations, people seem not to care, of the impact, that will cause. And of course, more importantly, as I said, one of the major causes of this flooding is human-induced, and we should not forget the activities of the construction sector.
Mr. Ayuba, every year, NIMET gives its warning.
Yeah.
NEMA will give its warning. Hydrological services will give its warning. Every year.
Yeah.
What can be done by governments at all levels to find a permanent or something similarly permanent to this problem?
Yeah, thank you very much. I said, enforcement, the local, that's the state, and local government, they should have their own local laws, because nature cannot be everywhere. And the environmental protection should be the duty of all, not only one agency. Even you and I, we are part, because if you don't act, the impact might come back to you, right? You should not leave the protection of environment in the hands of government agencies. I said the government agencies will continue to do their best, but people need to continuously, because awareness should be continuous. But this word enforcement, people need to be enforced for not obeying the laid down rules and regulations. Once they are enforced, right? Once they are enforced, once these laws are enforced, it shows deterrent to others. And more importantly, you see, the building, the construction sectors, right? There is still good work. There is still work to be done by people issuing permits to the people building houses along the waterways without proper inspection, right? And again, you see some housing estates. We visited so many housing estates. There are no drainage channels, right? There are no drainage channels. And when it rains, what happens? The impact will be there, and they'll be crying that government should come and help them. People need to be enforced. Enforce, and awareness.
You have so much on enforcement.
Yeah.
There are certain things that compromise enforcement or implementation. Issue of corruption, for instance. We've heard stories about how people are compromised, how builders will bribe, will pay certain money to certain officials, and then they look the other way while the wrong thing is done. Yeah. What are we doing to fight that?
Well, I can speak for them, but in our own side, that has been mandated to enforce environmental laws. We don't compromise corruption, as you know. You can ask most of the facilities, they are listening to us, and they are hearing it, that next year don't compromise corruption. So I want to speak for others. But as far as concerned, people need to do their job and based on their mandate. But as Nestor is concerned, we are actually doing our work and with zero tolerance to corruption.
Mr. Ayuba, I've heard you talk about laws and enforcement of laws, but some of these issues are above the laws.
Yeah.
Some of these people actually need help relocating from where they are. So it's not that they don't hear move. They hear move quite all right, but they keep saying they don't have anywhere to go to. Is there something the government can do about it? Because every year the floods come, the same stories.
I wouldn't believe that, because when I've worked in, last time I worked in Niger State and some other states, and when I was in Niger State as state coordinator, the state government, did their best to relocate people living along the banks of River Niger, the tributary of River Niger, and we were there. But they said they cannot live because now That's their ancestral land. They can't move. Government provided place for them to even relocate temporarily. They refused. Lokoja, as a case study, right? The state government have had enough engagement with them for them relocating. I'm aware of that. But they say they will not move. But what about people buying their own land personally? And you know this place is a flood-prone area. And you went ahead and bid on land. And when the chips are down, you cry. Who will come out to assist you? So people need to be enlightened. People need to assess the kind of land they are buying.
All right, let's go back to Kano, where Dr. Dahiru is there standing by. Dahiru, what are we facing really in terms of the magnitude of this? We are already dealing with the food inflation, and from the stories we've heard, this flood has affected farmlands, and all that. Are we likely to see an impact on our food production?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that should be anticipated, and then not just the food scarcity issues, but it comes with these traumatic effects. Some people find it so hard to recover from their loss, and then from the loss of loved ones as well. Because I told you that when you're talking about lives and livelihood of people, it entails a lot. And the problems of this flooding are becoming a far more serious issues than we previously thought. So I think there is a need, of course, there is going to be this food scarcity, of course, because I have been to some part of Jigawa recently. I have seen how this flooding has washed away so many farmlands. People are not going to be able to harvest, what they usually kind of harvest. And then you have this issue of insecurity as well, where people have already deserted their farms, increasing this demand, and then there is no supply in the country. So I think the government should do the needful, even start. And from an individual point of view, I think there is a need for a proper sensitization for people to understand the magnitude of these flooding cases. You see, I think that was why the Paris agreement, the Paris summit was held back in 2015. You see, back in 15, 16. You see, the world are so concerned about the increase in this temperature because it has been proven by experts that it is the leading cause of this flooding. Because whenever there is increase in temperature, you need to have this, air containing more water vapor. And when it is going to rain, it rains a lot. Even the dams that are releasing to Nigeria, I think they are releasing because of this intense rain that has been happening.
Dr. Dahiru, as an environmentalist, yes. Do you think there's anything the government would have done to avert this magnitude of disaster or to have reduced it?
Of course, first of all, we need to look at this flooding in Nigeria, the causes. If it has to do with this urban flooding, we need to ensure that, as the speaker has discussed, that people are building properly. They are not building on waterways in order to prevent all this surface flooding. And then we need to ensure that we are planting more trees, because that has been proven to be one of the natural and most effective ways of, cooling the atmosphere. And as long as you keep having this rise in temperature, you always have this intense rainfall. And that rainfall will cause you a lot of damage. Government should come up with strong policy to ensure that people are not cutting down trees indiscriminately. And then we need to ensure this establishment of vegetation cover, this tree planting. I can tell you in Kano, 4 out of 5 households are using fuel wood. So people have been cutting down trees at an alarming rate. And these trees are purposely meant to cool down the atmosphere and then in a long way prevent this flooding. So we need to ensure that we are doing all those things. We need to adapt to climate change, and then we need to even come to the term that it is now an obligation, no longer an option. So people should begin to question their own way of life. We need to have this mindset reorientation, to make sure that we are not excavating these cases.
All right. All right, thank you, Dr. Dahiru. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak. We appreciate you sharing your perspectives on the program. All right, back to the studio where we have Mr. Ayuba. I mean, Stella, you have a question?
Yeah, I would like, you know, he talked about planting trees, he talked about so many things. But the thing is, I want to believe experts talked about this thing in 2012. As a Nigerian, not necessarily somebody with Nigeria, why is it that these things happen and then people will talk about them? Now there's floods, so people are talking about them. Once the lands are dry and all of that, people go back to business as usual until another disaster. Why does that happen all the time?
Yes, I love what Dr. Dahiru just said. You know, I was thinking I was going to say that as my last parting words, that planting trees is one of the greatest antidote to climate change, because when we plant trees, you know, not only planting trees, but making them to survive. You have people planting 1,000 trees. At the end of the year, how many survived? How many survived? So planting trees help to stabilize the soil, help to hold the soil. When there is flood, it will hold the soil, and the soil will be intact, right? So there are many advantages of planting trees around your houses, around the water banks. It holds the soil. Depends on the nature of the soil and structure of the soil anyway. But planting trees helps. But I will still maintain awareness, and enforcement.
All right, well, thank you so much. It's a good place to end the discussion this morning. We thank you for joining us on Daybreak this morning. Mr. Ayuba Jacobs is the Director, Environmental Quality Control, National Environmental Standards and Regulation Enforcement Agency, NASRIA. Thank you so much. We appreciate your perspectives on the program.
It's my pleasure, please.
All right. Well, this is where we end the show for today. In case you have missed, you can catch up across all our social media platforms. We're always streaming live on YouTube 24/7. You can watch us there in case you are not in front of the TV set. My name is Ayuba Ilya. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.
Thank you for welcoming us into your homes this morning. Do well to join us same time, same station tomorrow. My name is Stella Iyaji. For now, do have a pleasant day.